You know, I don't think it's any secret that I'm not a fan of appendix carry. I think it's one of the, if not the most dangerous way you can possibly carry a firearm. In fact, I started my own little public awareness campaign, Save the Penis, Don't Point Your Glock at Your Cock, to try to make people aware that appendix carrying is a risk you just don't have to take. Now, I know some people say, well, I've never seen any proof that appendix carry is any more dangerous than any other type of carry. Well, to those people I say, well, you're obviously not looking, because you might want to try something as simple as a Google search or maybe reading the news, and you'll see that people are injuring themselves all the time in a very serious way because they're carrying their gun appendix carry style. It's just not a safe way to carry. If you can't find an example of this happening, you're just being willfully ignorant. Now, other people will say, well, you know, you're going to flag yourself no matter how you carry, so it's all the same. That's also not true, and that's also stupid. That's like saying, well, there's no point wearing eye protection when you go shooting because, you know, a piece of hot brass or hot lead might hit you in the forehead just as well as it might hit you in the eye, so why protect your eyes? It's because there's a big difference between getting hit in the forehead and getting hit in the eye by a piece of hot brass or lead. Just like there's a big difference between grazing your ass or grazing your thigh when you compare it to shooting yourself in the femoral artery. So appendix carry is just way too risky in my opinion. Now I know some tactical instructors will say, yeah, but it saves you an eighth of a second in a quick draw self-defense. Well, what are the chances of ever being in a quick draw self-defense situation? I mean, we all know that we're taking a small risk carrying for something that's probably not going to happen. We're probably never going to need our guns, and we choose that calculated risk. But then when you look at the small chance that you're ever going to need your gun, and then you look at how many of those instances are going to be fast draw, you know, gunfight situations where it actually makes a difference, that eighth of a second, that's going to be such a small sliver of the small chance of you needing your gun that it's going to be pretty much a zero possibility. Statistically, it's going to be like a zero possibility. So you're taking an advanced risk, a serious risk, by pointing a loaded gun at parts of your body when you don't have to, just because of something that almost has zero chance of happening, because you carry your gun every day. If you're someone who carries your gun every day, several hours a day, you're taking that risk constantly for something that's statistically never going to happen. And there's other safer ways you can carry. Now, I get emails from people all the time saying, but concealed carry is rough for me, and appendix carry is the only way I've found that it works. That's not usually true, because usually I'll point out to them that, hey, you know, this would work just as well and is much safer. And they usually find a reason, well, I don't want to do that. But usually comes down, they just want to appendix carry because they think it's tactical or whatever reason, or it conceals easier, you know, whatever. But, you know, for those people that send me emails all the time, and I like to answer my emails when people ask me a question, I get at least a couple times a week, well, if you're going to appendix carry, or, you know, I have to appendix carry, are there steps I could take to mitigate the risk? And to those people, I have to say, yes, there are steps you can take to mitigate the risk. There are things you can do if you choose to appendix carry, if you choose to take that risk, there are steps you can take to try to lessen the risk to yourself. So let's go over them here today. Now, the number one way to reduce the risk of appendix carry is just don't do it. But we've already determined some people are going to do it no matter what, or they feel like they need to do it for one reason or another. So we'll just skip past number one and we'll go to number two. Number two is something I don't recommend, but it is a way to significantly reduce the risk of appendix carry, and that is carry a gun unchambered. Now, if you want to carry a gun unchambered, then it's usually pretty safe to put it in your pants because there's no bullet in it when it's pointing at anything in your pants area. It's an unloaded gun, so therefore you're a lot safer. I don't recommend carrying an unloaded gun, but some people are okay with that. They're willing to rack the slide or whatever they have to do after they draw their weapon. So to these people, I'm like, yeah, the way you're carrying it is much safer. In fact, it's almost totally safe, but it's not very tactically sound, so it wouldn't be my choice of the way to go. Now, the third thing you can do to lessen the risk while appendix carrying is to carry a proper holster. Use a proper holster with your carry gun. Don't use something that collapses like a nylon holster, etc., something you have to pry back apart to put your gun back into. Anytime that happens, you're just increasing the risk of accidentally activating that trigger while you're putting the gun back in the holster. So always use a good, solid, firm fitting holster that maintains its shape and doesn't collapse and is made specifically for your gun. That's one thing you can do to really lessen your risks of an accident. Now, the next thing you could do if you want to reduce the risk of injury is carry a gun with a safety. If you carry a gun with a safety, then the safety can be on while the gun is holstered. You can re-engage the safety before you reholster. That does reduce the risk of injury. Now, we all know anything mechanical like a safety can fail, and you can fail as a person to remember to put it on before you reholster your gun. But having that safety there, if you use it properly, will reduce the risk of injuring yourself while appendix carrying. Now, the fourth thing you can do to try to reduce the risk from appendix carry is carry a double action, single action gun. Something that's hammer fired and has a double action, single action capability. Something like a Beretta 92 or a SIG gun, because that heavy double action first pull of the trigger helps prevent negligent discharge, because most of the negligent discharges occur because a light single action or double action only trigger is activated accidentally while reholstering. That heavy double action trigger really reduces the chances of that happening. Now, I prefer double action single action guns, so if I was going to appendix carry, this is something I would definitely do, and this would definitely reduce your risk of a negligent discharge. Still, I don't recommend guns with safeties for carry, so this wouldn't be something I would do. Now, the next thing you can do, if you're someone like me that doesn't want to carry a gun with a safety, or you're not like me and you don't want to carry a double action, single action gun, you insist on carrying a striker fired gun with no safety, don't modify the trigger. So many people try to create triggers on their carry guns that are so light they go off if you barely breathe on the trigger. That's not appropriate for appendix carry. Any gun that you're ever going to have to put your hand on while it's loaded, just to draw it even, while it's pointed at important parts of your body, or you're going to have to reholster while it's loaded and pointed at important parts of your body, you don't want a 1.5 pound trigger on. Leave your trigger stock weight. Doesn't have to be the stock trigger in my opinion. Just make sure you get a good quality trigger. We've all seen the video that Mr. Guns and Gear reposted from True Exodus the other day about the holster, his trigger being deactivated every time he put it in his holster. It was actually firing the trigger, his Zev trigger, every time he put it in the holster. I don't think it's actually the fault of just the trigger itself. I think it's the fault of it being a lighter trigger. Whenever I replace a trigger, I never put a trigger on that changes the weight of the trigger pull or changes the trigger bar or other mechanics of the gun. I'll just change the trigger that has a different shape. I will not change weights or any of the mechanicals outside the trigger, any of the mechanic parts outside the trigger that actually make the gun fire. I will not do that. If you're going to carry a striker fired gun, don't try to make it some speed race gun. You know, it's not a race gun. It's a self-defense gun, and that super light trigger creates a great deal of risk if you're going to be carrying appendix. And the last thing you can do to reduce the risk, and this is the thing that a lot of people love to bring up all the time, is you can practice. It's very important that you practice drawing from that holster and maintaining your finger in the proper position, not putting it on the trigger until you need the gun. Unfortunately, if you ever have to draw your gun in self-defense, your mind thinks you need that gun right away, so you might put your finger on the trigger anyway, so I wouldn't want that gun pointed at my femoral artery when that happens. If I ever have to draw a gun into rest, I don't want it pointing at a part of my body that can cause me to bleed out in a matter of seconds. But if you're going to do it, make sure you practice, and not just drawing, but reholstering. Practice trigger discipline, period, but specifically practice it while reholstering and drawing that weapon again and again and again. Practice, 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 practice. You don't want to be in a situation like that and not have practiced doing this. Once again, practice isn't going to prevent mechanical failure. It isn't going to prevent holster failure. Practice isn't even assuredly going to prevent human failure, human error. So practice is not going to eliminate all risks, but it will help some. But it's still a risky activity. So if you're carrying appendix, even if you practice, it's still risky. So there you have it. I just don't think appendix carry is a safe way to carry. The things you would have to do to make it safe are ways I wouldn't want to carry a gun, so I just don't believe in it. In fact, with the research I've done, I think there's enough evidence to make a good case for the fact that appendix carry and carrying in the front waistband of your pants has now surpassed hunting as one of the major causes of self-inflicted accidental gunshot wounds. It used to be cleaning your gun and hunting were the two biggest causes of this. Now I think it's cleaning your gun and appendix carrying. So it's definitely not a safe way to carry, and no matter how much tacti-tard nonsense you spout about it is going to change that. A simple knowledge of anatomy and statistics will tell you that it's an unnecessary risk. It's like saying, it's a lot safer to swim with crocodiles if you practice swimming with crocodiles and you practice wrestling crocodiles. Well, that might be true, but it'd just be a lot safer to not be an idiot and don't swim with crocodiles because there's no reason to in your everyday life. But some people are going to do it. They're actually going to appendix carry no matter what because they like it for one reason or another, or maybe they have to do it for one reason or another. So if you do choose to do it, like I said, those are the things I think you can do that will reduce your risk of having a negligent discharge.